Hi everyone, and welcome to the Esports Speaker Series presented by the University of Kentucky Federal Credit Union. This series brings you industry professionals, academics, and researchers from esports and gaming on the first Thursday of each month. Today we're joined by Dr. Meg Wallace, an associate professor and director of undergraduate studies in the philosophy department, with her presentation about the value of playing games. Dr. Wallace's research interests are primarily in metaphysics ontology, but she's also interested in using her interests, which may not immediately appear to be philosophical, in order to help get people interested in doing philosophy, which she'll talk a little bit about today. Don't forget that after the talk, we'll have a Q&A period with Dr. Wallace, so please feel free to ask questions in the chat for that question period at the end. And now, without further ado, here is Dr. Meg Wallace with her talk, Go Play, The Value of Playing Games.
Hi. My name is Meg Wallace, and I am a professor of philosophy and also director of undergraduate studies in the philosophy department. My usual research interests surround metaphysics and ontology, which is the study of what there is. So I like to think about the world and what's in it. I like to think about ordinary objects like tables and chairs and how they might be made. When I start to give the sort of very quick version of what I do, it can sound kind of bizarre and silly. But I hope that connects up with what I'm going to talk about today, which is when people engage in something that initially sounds silly or pointless, we can do some investigating to see that there is a point to it. What I want to talk about today is the value in playing games. One of the reasons that this interests me is because alongside my research interests, I also have teaching interests in teaching circus and philosophy. I also like teaching science fiction and philosophy. In general, I like teaching philosophy alongside other things so that people maybe don't expect philosophy to come along, but also to get people to see that philosophy can be a hub that touches on so many different topics. It really is sort of central to a lot of different things that you may be interested in and didn't realize that philosophy might have something to say. So the reason I want to talk about the value of playing games is because this is something that I talk about in my circus and philosophy class when we talk about circus as a game. So one of the unique things about this course that I teach is that people don't just learn about the circus. We don't just go to the circus or watch circus acts or read about the history of circus. I actually have them do circus. So my students learn to juggle. They learn to climb the silks. They learn to acrobalance with other students. They are physically and actively engaged in doing circus arts. Now, why would I have them do that? And why is that at all related to philosophy is something that my class gets into. But it comes back to this idea that circus, as a voluntary participant, is very game-like. The sorts of things that you engage in are kind of silly. You might think when you're throwing a ball up in the air and you're trying to juggle, that this is a silly endeavor. And especially if you're not a juggler and you're trying it for the first time, what happens is that 9 times out of 10, you throw the ball and you try and catch it in your other hand and you drop it. And if you can do it once with one ball, you try 2, you certainly drop one of those. And if you've got that, then maybe you try 3 and you drop one of those. And juggling, when you learn this activity, especially as an amateur, it can be very frustrating. It's filled with tons of failure because all you're doing for a long while is just dropping the balls all over the place. And we might wonder, why even engage in something where you're failing a lot? Why engage in something that not only are you failing a lot, it's silly, right? Why would you do this? Why would you lob balls up in the air and try and catch them? Why would you learn to juggle? It seems like a silly endeavor. Well, believe it or not, this has a lot of connection to why we play games. If you think of juggling as a game, if you think as recreational circus, something that amateurs can do and just try to attempt, somebody who is not an athlete, is not a circus performer, just doing these silly, seemingly wild endeavors, what you end up seeing is that a lot of the behavior that is happening with participants who are doing something recreationally, like recreational circus, they're attempting it and getting a lot out of it the way a lot of people are playing games. So circus as a participant, as a first-person experience that you're doing yourself, you're actively engaging in it, is very game-like. And so it's very important to me when I'm teaching this class and teaching it to other people that they experience that game-like sensation. Now for this talk, I want to talk about all kinds of games. So I'm talking about chess and Tic Tac Toe and hopscotch and any kind of sports games, so basketball and football, any kind of game at all, board games, role-playing games, video games, you name it. The word game here, I mean really broadly. Anything, well, we're going to look at some definitions of what exactly I mean by that, but anything that intuitively comes to you right now as a game, that's what I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the value of playing games. Now, why would I do that? Well, first of all, lots of people think it's frivolous and stupid. Most people don't think there's any point in playing games, that it's something you do in your free time, and certainly they'll think, well, you don't want to do that when you could be doing more important things in life. So most people don't think that it's important. On top of that, the people who do think that it's important usually think that the value of games comes from its instrumental value or its extrinsic value. It's about the value of the things that it can bring to real life. So you might have heard some people argue that games are valuable because when you play them, it increases your hand-eye coordination, which is a skill you can then export to the real world, right? If you have good hand-eye coordination by playing Super Mario Brothers, then you can have good hand-eye coordination in the real world, which should help you. It has been argued by some people that if you play a certain game and you gain some confidence in accomplishing certain tasks, that confidence spills over into the real world, and then you're confident in your daily tasks as a residual effect of that game playing. That's exporting some skill or some kind of quality that the game is giving you and bringing it to the real world, right? If you are a game designer, if you play games professionally, if games sort of contributes to the fact that you make lots and lots of money, that's awesome. But that's an extrinsic benefit of playing games. It means that it's becoming part of your career or profession. But that's not about the value of the game itself, it's what the game can bring to real life. So those people who do think games are valuable generally find value in games for the sorts of qualities that it can bring outside of the game and into real life. I don't want to look at that. I want to see if games can be intrinsically valuable, if the game and playing games can be valuable in itself and what kind of value it can hold for us. Now, there are some philosophers who think that games can be valuable, but usually they think that it's valuable because of what the game is, and that the game is a subset of something we already think is valuable. So for example, you might think, well, games are really interesting, but they're just kind of a version of fiction. It's just a story, and when you play a game, you're just involved in this interactive story, but we know that fictions are valuable, so that's how it gets its value. Or if you've ever played a really intense video game, it has a cinematic quality, and you might think, wow, this is just like an interactive movie, and we already value movies and we value cinema, so if this is just an interactive movie, then it's valuable because of that. So a lot of people, or some philosophers, have argued that video games and games in general get their value because it's a subset of some other thing that we think is valuable. I don't want to look at that either. What I want to do is talk about a particular philosopher who has a book that just came out. It's fantastic. This is C.T. Nguyen, and this is Games, Agency as Art. And in this book, he talks about the value of playing games in and of itself. So not because you can transport this skill or value that you learn in games and take it to the outside world, not because in playing hours and hours and hours of video games you then can be a professional game player and make heaps and heaps of money, not because in playing games you then understand how to code and program and then you can make a career out of that. It's not that. It's that, no, that actually just engaging in a game, like Tic Tac Toe, like hopscotch, like Twister, right? Even beer pong, right? That there is a value in playing games, and that value is intrinsic to the games themselves. It's not something you export, and it's not instrumental so that, oh, it's good for something else. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to go through some of his views, some of the things that he talks about, and basically summarize his view about why he thinks that games are valuable, so that I can, at the end, hopefully have shown you at least one person's view about why playing games is valuable. What I'd like to do at the end, if I have time, is then take that back to my research and say why I find that important and sort of the bigger picture of what I want to talk about. Okay, so let's get started. Before we get into talking about the value of playing games, there's two things that we need to discuss. And if you haven't taken any philosophy classes, here's usually how philosophy classes go, or philosophy discussion. We have some kind of question or topic that we want to discuss. This question or topic usually has some key terms. In this case, value and playing games. And we may have an intuitive sense of what we think that those are, right? You know what values are. You value some things, you don't value other things. You may disagree with the sorts of values that you and a friend share, or maybe you and not a friend share. And we also know what playing games are, right? I can give you a bunch of examples. I have already, right? Hopscotch, Tic Tac Toe, video games, sports, anything where it seems like it's kind of competitive, or maybe there are some rules that you're adopting. But that's just examples and intuition. What philosophers often do is they take those key terms, and before we embark on a discussion about the value of playing games, we make sure that we understand what those terms mean. So we need to define our terms. And when I talk about value, and when I'm summarizing what T. Nguyen talks about in his book, I'm talking about aesthetic value. An aesthetic value, and aesthetics in general, actually let's just talk about aesthetics before we talk about the value. Aesthetics is the study of art and beauty. So you may have heard the word aesthetic before, you may have heard somebody saying that something has aesthetic value. It's generally the study of art and beauty, and in particular it may be the study of the rules governing art and beauty. So if you ever take an art class, you may have a teacher who tells you how to draw something in a particular way, how to make the composition of a painting look a particular way, and usually the rules around art are centered around how can you make something beautiful or artistic. Not all art is beautiful, and of course, whether that's the case or not is a subject for aesthetics. But this idea that there's some kind of qualities out in the world that have to do with beauty and art, and aesthetics is the study of those. Now, when we talk about aesthetic value, generally what we're talking about are aesthetic qualities. And these can be what's beautiful, so beauty. But what else do we have besides beauty? If you say that something is beautiful, or if it's art, sometimes when you're talking about what's beautiful, you can talk about things like its flow, a harmony, right? Sometimes grace. So sometimes when people are watching a ballet, they might see the dancers and say, oh wow, that's just beautiful, how graceful they are, right? When you're watching maybe somebody who's dancing with another person and they just seem to flow, there's some kind of harmony. When you're talking about music, these are all adjectives that we might use to describe some kind of aesthetic quality that kind of gets at something that comes out of the art itself, right? But we also have other things. So we've got beauty, we've got flow, we've got harmony, we've got grace. And when we're talking about the value of playing games, I want to talk about the aesthetic value of playing games. And here you might wonder how aesthetic qualities have anything to do with gameplay. I mean, sure, there are some video games right now that once you turn them on and you look at the world that they've created and the fact that digital worlds in video games are just incredible. It seems like it's a real world. It's just gorgeous to look at. It's like watching a beautiful movie, some kind of cinematic art form, right? It's just amazing. And how the characters move and what the world looks like and the fact that you can kind of explore things. It's like walking around in a beautiful city. The architecture and the design, and it's just visually stunning. So you might think, oh, that's what I mean, that you can walk around in a game and you can look around and it's got the same aesthetic features, the same kind of beauty, the flow, the harmony or grace that a gorgeous city might have, right? One that you walk around and you can just navigate through and enjoy the sort of pleasures that the city brings you and all of its visual treats. That's not it. It's not just the visual, right? So I don't want to just talk about the beauty, the flow, the harmony, or the grace. There's other features that games have that that can generalize across games. So one of the problems with just saying, oh no, I'm talking about the cinematic beauty of looking at a rich video game, one that's been programmed well, is that that doesn't translate to Tic Tac Toe or Twister or beer pong, right? So if we think of all the things that are games, the sorts of things that you might think are visually stunning in some cases doesn't generalize to all other kinds of games. So what we're looking for are aesthetic qualities that carry over to nearly all games. And that's the kind of value we're looking for. Is there an aesthetic value that you can harness when you're playing a game? And what Thi Nguyen is going to argue is that yes, there are, and we're going to get to those in just a minute. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about value. I'm talking about aesthetic value, and I'm talking about some kind of features that center around art and beauty, and the kinds of qualities I'm talking about, maybe something like flow, harmony, and grace, and the details of that we'll get to in just a minute. Okay, so we've got that. But now what do we mean when we say that we're playing games? For this, we're going to take a definition that Thi Nguyen suggests, so we're borrowing from him, who borrows it from Bernard Suits. And what Bernard Suits says is that playing a game is the voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. That's his very short definition of playing a game. He actually has a longer, more drawn-out definition. This is the quote-unquote portable version of what he thinks playing a game is. Now, in philosophy, very often, no matter what the topic is, what can happen is that we take a term that we're interested in, such as, well, what is a game? And we go back and forth with various different theories about what you think a game is. And then you analyze that definition, and you see if it fits your ideas of what a game is. And if some quintessential games like Monopoly is out, then it's not a good definition. If a quintessential game like Monopoly is in, then it may be a good definition, and we keep looking around to see that everything that we think is a game fits this definition, and then we can work on our analysis of what a game is. That's a whole issue I don't even want to get into right now. Thi Nguyen in his book just takes this as a starting point and does say that, you know, you can go back and forth about whether you think this is a good definition. What I care about, and I'm going to bring this back at the end of the talk, is that I just like the fact that we are creatures who voluntarily attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. So whether this is a correct definition of games or not, the fact that we do this, and I'm going to give you heaps of examples to show that we do, the fact that we do this, and the fact that there seems to be some aesthetic value in doing it, the fact that we can get some good out of it, some aesthetic goods out of it, is awesome to me. I love this. And I think that what it does is it shows that we have an ability to be pretty flexible about what we think is necessary and unnecessary. That's going to be a point I make at another time, but I will talk about it just a bit at the end. I just want to flag it for just a minute. So for right now, Suits suggests that playing a game is a voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. We're going to use that as our definition of games. Just know that for me, nothing really hangs on us getting the definition exactly right. This is good enough. And more to the point, I care that we do this. I just think it's really interesting that we do. And certainly for a lot of games, we do, right? So you want to play Tic Tac Toe with your toddler, which is something that I do a lot. And we draw the board, and then inevitably he puts his X, I put my O, and then we keep going, and somebody wins or somebody doesn't win, we have a draw or whatever. We take this up, and sometimes for whole minutes, which if you have kids, that's a long time. So this can keep us occupied for quite a while. And I'm delighting in the fact that he's actually playing a game which a few months ago he probably didn't get or wasn't quite hanging on to the rules. So I am excited about seeing his cognitive development. But we both voluntarily attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. This is totally unnecessary, right? I don't need to be hemmed in by the tic-tac-toe board. I don't need to be constrained by the fact that I have to go, then he has to go, then I have to go, then he has to go. And in fact, when he was first learning this game, I would give him a blank tic-tac-toe board, and what would he do? He'd just put all X's all in a row and be like, I did it! I won! He didn't win. You just putting your X's all in a row isn't playing the game. What's important in playing a game is that you overcome unnecessary and, quite frankly, temporary obstacles. You're given rules, and these are restraints on how to behave. And they tell you, look, you can't do this certain move or you're not playing the game. So this captures a thing that we do, even if it's not quite the right analysis of games. And that's why I'm interested in it. Okay, so we're getting closer. I've defined what the value is. When we're talking about value, I'm talking about aesthetic value. So we're looking for some kind of beauty or flow or harmony, although what that could be in a game, who knows? Well, I know, and I'm going to tell you in about 5 minutes, so then you'll know. And also that we have this first pass definition of a game or analysis of a game where it's us voluntarily attempting to overcome unnecessary obstacles. Okay. So now that we've got that, let's get to what Teen Win says in his book, and in particular, why he thinks that games are aesthetically valuable. Okay, first thing that we need to look at in order to understand one of Teen Win's main claims is that there's a distinction between ends and means. Now, this may be a distinction you have heard of. Philosophers talk about it a lot when we talk about reasons for why we go after things. You may have heard of it in ethics, right? Do the ends justify the means? Or the means justify the ends? That sort of question. When we talk about ends, this can change. And we're going to see that because you can take up ends and change them depending on what you're talking about. But ordinarily, let's start with me asking you, what sorts of goals or ends are you looking for in your life? If you were to say, okay, I need to write down the top 10 things that I want in my life, the things that, these are my goals, these are the things that in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I want to have accomplished. I want to have done. Right, if they're activities. They're things I want to have if they're material goods. They're things that you will want to have accomplished, right, if it's like climbing Mount Everest or whatever. So what are your ends or goals? What are the things, your aims, the things that you are after? Well, for a lot of people, it's things like, I want a house, a little yard, maybe you want a tree, maybe you want a family, right? Maybe you want some pets. Maybe you are super fancy and you want a boat, right? Maybe you want a job that you love. You go to work every day and you're just totally fulfilled. It's awesome. You just really, really, really love it. These are all ends or goals. Okay, these are things that we want. And normally what happens is we have these in mind, and you can have various different kinds of ends and goals. Like maybe you have the long-term goal, like the thing that you want in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then maybe you have the short-term goal. Maybe you're like, okay, you know what? I know we're in a pandemic and things are crazy, but at least one time this week, I'm gonna go for a run, right? I'm gonna get out there, I'm gonna actually be active, and I'm gonna go for a run. That can be a goal or an end. It can be to eat healthier, to be a little more engaged in your classes. It could be all sorts of things, right? You can have various different ends. What we do is we look at our ends and then we try to figure out, when this is just us here now, how it is that we go from us here now, given the things that you have, your materials at your disposal, the skills that you've got, the means, right? How do you go from here to there? What's in between? And this can be different for everybody. Maybe in order to get a house, you need lots and lots of money, right? This is a usual story for most of us. The boat, the house, maybe the really fancy job, right? Maybe you need lots of money to get there. So maybe that's a step that you need to get in order to get those things. And then there might be a question of, okay, well, how do I get lots and lots of money? And maybe that's a job you don't love so much, right? So it's a job you don't like so much, but you need to have that job you don't like so much to get the money that you need so that you can get the house or eventually work up to the job that you do love, right? Maybe you need an education. So maybe you need to go to school and you need to get your degree or your diploma. You need to get good grades. You need to get letters of recommendation, right? A lot of you, if you're in classes right now, you're taking those classes, some of which you may really love, but some of which may just be classes that you take because you have to. They're core requirements and you need it to graduate, and you need that degree in order to get the job that you want so that you can maybe be happy. I didn't put that here, but happiness is a big one, right? This is a big goal of a lot of people, to be happy. It's just harder to draw. It's an abstract thing. So you have these things that you need to get or do or possess or steps you need to go through. These are the means by which you get your ends. And this happens all the time, right? These are the means, these are the ends, and we try to have various different means to get to these ends. Now, normally, when you are doing something that's a means to an end, we value the means insofar as it gets you to the end. So take playing video games or taking a philosophy class. Here's one question that probably gets asked of both people who take philosophy classes and people who play a lot of video games. What are you going to do with that? What's the point in doing that? Isn't that kind of pointless? Where's that going to take you? Where is that going to take you? What are you going to do with that? Is something that is probably asked of both video game players and people who take philosophy courses. And here's the thing. You could give an answer where it is on your path to get to some end. And if we value the end, then that path is going to be perfectly acceptable because we value the path insofar as we value the end that's going to produce, right? So if you say, oh, well, I'm taking this philosophy class because I saw that one of the best majors to have to take the LSAT, to then get into law school, to then get a good law job, right, be a lawyer, is philosophy. Philosophers do great on the LSAT, and I want to do great on the LSAT, so I'm going to take philosophy, and that way it's going to sort of be a way to get to the end of having a job I love, which is being a fancy lawyer. Then people would probably say, wow, that's great. Good job. Stick with that philosophy class, right? You've got a plan. And it fits in that plan, and it's a means to an end. But if you answer in a different way, if you say, well, I don't really know, I'd heard about philosophy, it seemed kind of neat, I don't know, the topic seemed kind of interesting, I don't really know what I'm going to do with it, but I just kind of like it, then people are a little more skeptical. What, you're just taking it for fun? Is that what you're going to do with your career? I mean, you've got to think about your future, right? So when we try to convince people that certain things are valuable in and of themselves, that can take a little bit more convincing and be a little less plausible than pointing to the end and say, well, look, this end is valuable and you'll agree with that, so this is my means to the end. So the point is, we normally take up these means and value them in a certain way because of the ends that we're pursuing and because of the ends that those means are trying to take us to. And we value them in a particular way, so we value the means to that way. Okay? That's normal. That's ordinary life. That's how we go through most of what we do. But as T. Nguyen argues in his book, games are different, right? Notice that in this graph of things that we pursue and the things that we love and what we're aiming for, nowhere in there was the means or an end of getting 3 in a row on a tic-tac-toe board. Nowhere in there did it say, oh, you gotta go save a princess in a tower. Nowhere in there did it say, oh, and you gotta get a little ball in a hoop. And oh, you gotta get a different ball across some line, right? If you try to explain the ends of a game in terms of that means-end relationship that we have in ordinary life, it starts to seem ridiculous. And in fact, if you do write them out right here, we got our tic-tac-toe board. And the ends of this game are that you have to get 3 in a row. And you're constrained in certain ways. You can only go once. You can't do all your moves at once. You have to play with another player, right? I don't know if you've tried this. You can try it right now if you want to get your paper out. But it's really hard to play tic-tac-toe by yourself. And I'll do be an X, and then I'll be an O, and then I'll go here. And then, oh, I'm going to block myself, right? It doesn't really work that way. You have to have another player. Now, there are games you can play by yourself, like solitaire or something like that, but then you have an element of chance in the cards. This particular game, you need an opponent. You need to flip every other time, right? One person goes, then the other. You can't go 3 times in a row. And you can't switch who you are. You can't be an O and then decide to be an X the next move so that you can win. There are constraints. But the end of the game, right, the point, the thing that you get at the end when you win, well, you don't get anything. You're the winner. You won tic-tac-toe. That's it. It's not that exciting of an end. You just got 3 in a row. If you're a toddler, it's super exciting, and it takes up all your day, and you go around saying, I'm the winner all day long. But for most of us, that's not that exciting of an end. But you may find yourself playing it, maybe with a toddler, or maybe with somebody else. Maybe you've done it in your past. Maybe you're more sophisticated. Tic-tac-toe is no longer your speed. But there are other games that are your speed. Maybe you're a chess player. Maybe you play video games that are really engaging, right? Those ends in those games, whether it's chess or video games, think about what the ends are, right? So you have to save a princess from a tower. You have to move certain pieces on a checkered board in a particular way. Even sports, right? You take a basketball and you put it through a hoop. Or football, you take a ball and you go across a line. I'm not a sports person, so sorry if even when I describe the sports, they sound kind of ridiculous, but they are ridiculous when you look at them as ends that should be valued in and of themselves in the way that happiness, shelter, a house, a boat, right? Those things, you think, oh, those things are valuable, so I don't need to explain why they're valuable. But if you take the ends of a game, they're not. So what's going on here? Well, these silly ends of games become valuable in the opposite way, right? So in ordinary life, the ends are valuable, and that kind of brings value to the means because they get us to the ends. Games, T. Nguyen argues, has a motivational inversion. A motivational inversion of ordinary life. You take up ends that you don't care about because of the things that it gives you, because of the experiences that you have in the struggle to get there, right? So yes, it may be that when you're playing tic-tac-toe, the struggle is not real, right? You're just kind of playing with a toddler, and there's not really a struggle because you know that the intellectual effort needed to play tic-tac-toe is only so large, and it's only going to be so exciting. But take any other game, right? You pick up a game, maybe a video game, right, where you pick it up and you don't know how to play it. And first of all, you have that little tutorial, right, where you kind of go through and figure out how to move, and you figure out what your abilities are. And then a story unfolds, and you slowly figure out what you need to do, what your goals are. what the purpose of the character is. Maybe you can change characters, right? Maybe there's lots of different characters that you can play. There's lots of different storylines. Maybe there's you can play in a mode where you just kind of explore and you go on these adventures, but there's really no story at all. Maybe it's that kind of game. Maybe there's one where it's equivalent to you have to go save the princess from the tower, and when that's done, the game is over, right? Whatever it is, the ends themselves, when you describe them in the way that's sort of laid out by the game, they're not that important. But we pick them up because what is important is the struggle in figuring it out. And so before, when I was talking about the aesthetic features, what's aesthetically valuable, we were talking about beauty and harmony. One of the things that Thi Nguyen talks about is that there is a kind of harmony when you're playing a game, a strategic game in particular. And we do feel this in ordinary life. It is the harmony of you having the right kind of skill set to solve a problem, right? That moment when you've solved a problem and you did it, you accomplished a puzzle, right? There was a problem, you had a certain skill set, you used that skill set to maybe figure it out. It wasn't super easy, right? It's not tic-tac-toe. There was a bit of a struggle. Maybe you tried 4, 5, 800 times and you failed. And you keep trying. And then you get it. And then it's just amazing. The feeling of finally solving a problem, of finally figuring out how to save that princess from the tower. The feeling of finally getting beyond a certain level, right? That feels really good. That is a real feeling. That's an aesthetic feeling. That is a feeling of harmony. When our skill set, when our abilities can match the problem before us, and we can use our abilities to solve the problem, that is an amazing feeling. Now, does it happen in real life? Yes, right? It may be that you have a scheduling problem and you figure it out. It may be that your car broke down and you fix it, right? You don't have to take it to someone else, you do it. Maybe your friend is having a problem and you help solve it, right? Maybe you've got a logistical problem like, well, I really want to take this class, but then I have my job and it looks like there's a schedule conflict, but then you figure out a way to make it work, okay? Those things happen in real life, but they don't happen super often. They're kind of a surprise when they do. And you don't always, well, they're not always it's a surprise when you do, so you're not always expecting it, right? You don't know when it's coming along. And you may not be in the mood, quite frankly, right? It could be like, okay, right now the world is kind of crazy and my life is super busy and I just have so much going on. The last thing I need is one more problem to solve. So it may be that you're just in the sort of state that having one more problem to solve isn't going to give you this sense of harmony that you might get when you play a game. So what Thi Nguyen points out is that when you're playing games, this harmony of having your abilities fit the problems that need to be solved and this sort of aesthetic feeling of satisfaction and aha when you've solved it, that games are designed to give you that feeling over and over and over again, right? They are designed to give you that sensation when you play them, and that's good. Because we don't always have that in real life. And so one of the reasons we may take up these silly ends is to keep feeling that aesthetic sensation, that quality of satisfaction, of harmony, of fit, right? And when in ordinary life, the problems are too big and too far and few in between, right? The world is a mess. And I don't have the abilities to go and fix it. But you know what? I can go save a princess from a tower. So you're given these tasks and these abilities that are just about right to solve a problem. And that can give rise to aesthetic feelings of harmony that we don't very often find wild in the world. Okay? So one of the things that Thi Nguyen points out is that games are motivational inversion of ordinary life. You pick up ends you don't care about because you value the means to get there. You value the things that come about in the struggle to accomplish these ends that you don't really care about, right? It's the thing in between, the struggle, the journey, the way of solving it that you care about. Notice that's the opposite of real life. In real life, you care about the ends. That's a motivational inversion of ordinary life. I'm going to say something real quickly, but I am running out of time, so I'm going to speed this up. One of the things that Thi Nguyen talks about is the difference between striving play and achievement play. And in order to understand that difference, right, he wants to get you to understand the difference between the ends of the game, which I've been talking about, and compare that to the purpose in playing. So I talked about the ends of the game, right, which is just like when you say them, it sounds silly, like getting 3 in a row for Tic Tac Toe or getting the ball in the hoop for basketball. That is the goals that the game says this is what you need to do to win. Your purpose in playing, though, might be to have fun, to enjoy the struggle, to spend some time doing something other than staring at the TV, right? It could be you're bored, it's a pandemic, you're quarantined, what else are you going to do, right? To kill time. There can be heaps of reasons of your purpose in playing the game. Striving play, Thi Nguyen says, is when the ends of the game, the goals of the game, and your purpose in playing come apart, right? You don't really care about winning. Your purpose in playing is to enjoy the struggle and to enjoy the problem solving, and that's the purpose. And it's because of that that you then take up the ends temporarily, but you don't really care about these, so they come apart. Achievement play, though, is when here are the ends of the game. You got to save the princess from the tower, and your purpose in playing is to win, right? And so it's when your purpose in playing aligns with the goals of the game. This could be people who are professional game players, professional sports players, people who make a lot of money by winning, professional poker players. So you can have various different reasons for playing, purposes in playing, and that can come apart from the ends of the game. What I like to think about, and I'm going to bring this back to my research and kind of wrap up, is why it is that so many of us are striving players and not achievement players. Yeah, there are people who just all they care about is winning and they just, want to win for winning's sake or because they make heaps and heaps of money. But most of us, we're just amateurs. We're just people who enjoy the struggle. This is just ordinary. We like the mental challenge of trying to solve problems. And games, by design, harness that and deliver that feeling every time we engage in that play. And that's aesthetically valuable. What I'm interested in is why we do that so often and what that says about us and what exactly we're doing when we go from taking an end that is unnecessary, like getting 3 in a row in Tic Tac Toe, and taking that up as an end I care about, making it necessary temporarily, right? So I don't really care about it, but when I'm playing with my toddler, I do, right? We kind of go back and forth, and there's not much of a struggle, but there's a little bit. I do have to pay attention. If I don't pay attention, he'll beat me, right? He's getting really good. So you take it up, and you go from thinking that it's unnecessary to thinking that it's necessary or it's temporary, but you buy into it. You immerse yourself in this goal or this end. Why do we do that? What does that say about us? What does that say about us as human beings? These are the sorts of questions that interest me to bring it back to my research and my teaching. So when I have people engage in something for the first person, right? No, I want you to actually be the person who juggles. I want you to take a ball and lob it in the air. And yes, I want you to drop it 1,000 times. And then finally, maybe you get a juggle, right? Why do I do that? Well, one is to harness this feeling of satisfaction when it works, right? This is a game. I fully recognize that it's silly and pointless, but there is a aesthetic quality that comes about when you've unlocked a skill, when you've actually done something that the game has asked you to do, when you've solved the problem, even if it's artificial. So games are, right? Setting up artificial ends. I'm interested in all the ways that we do that, and I think all the ways that we do that may go beyond just playing games. The point is, though, to do see when it is that we make this shift, when we do go from thinking that things are unnecessary ends, adopting them temporarily as things we care about, and then seeing what kind of value we get when we embark on those. Okay. All right, I talked quite a bit, so let me just end with this real quickly. I have talked about the value of games, briefly talked about the kind of value that I'm interested in, which is aesthetic value, and talked about games as a voluntary attempt to overcome obstacles. The reason that I think it's important to understand that games can deliver this is, notice that this is a value that games have independent of any instrumental value that you can take away. So this is not, oh, if I play games, then I will improve my hand-eye coordination and then I'll be able to do things in the real world. This isn't, oh, if I gain confidence in the game, then I can go out and be confident in the world. This is, no, within the game, not exporting it, not saying that the world is this way, not making any false claims about the world, like oversimplifying the moral fabric of our universe, right? Not thinking that the world is so simple that there are X's and O's in a box and something like that. But within the constraints of a game, there is value in going through that, the aesthetic value of the struggle of overcoming certain obstacles that we adopt temporarily. And that's pretty cool.
Hi there again, everyone. Now we are back for a Q&A period with Dr. Meg Wallace. Meg, thank you so much for that fascinating and intriguing talk. Let me ask you some questions that we have from the audience. So first, the first question we have is asking if you could say some more about the kind of aesthetic value one gets from participating in striving play. More specifically, how is the aesthetic value one gets from striving play specific to games in particular? So if someone is playing a game for reasons besides trying to win, for instance, like you say, playing just to have fun or to take a break from sitting at a desk all day, couldn't someone get that same aesthetic value from participating in a non-gaming activity, like going for a walk or taking a yoga class?
Great question, MC. Thank you. So yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I think trying to figure out when we are actually getting this kind of aesthetic value and what is bringing it is a great question. It can very much be that other things give you this same aesthetic value. So just like if you are looking at art, or you're watching a ballet, or you're getting some kind of aesthetic value out of some other kind of art form, it's not that just because a ballet might give you some aesthetic value in watching it because you get to watch the gracefulness of the dancers, that you're not able to get gracefulness out of some other art form, right? So it's not that this is an aesthetic value that you only get out of games. But there is something unique about games if it's defined in this Seussian way, where it's this voluntary attempt to take up these unnecessary obstacles. If you're looking at something like going for a walk or taking a yoga class, I actually think that taking a yoga class or voluntary activities like taking a CrossFit class, or if you are doing recreational sports like your recreational basketball, I do think these count as games. So it may very well be that taking a yoga class does count as a game. I mean, you do have some constraints on your behavior, right? In order to do yoga, you get your mat out. There are these rules. You can't make really loud noises unless the yoga teacher tells you you can. You have to do particular poses. You have to behave in a certain way. I mean, there are rules, and there are constraints on how you need to behave. And there are certain things that you can do and certain things you can't do. So as far as rules for agency and behavior, you do have that in yoga class. Now, walk is different. You may think that that's not game-like. There aren't really any rules. It's just kind of free form. Nobody's designed it. It's not, you don't have to take on a new agency in order to participate in it. That's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't get this sort of beauty from the struggle of a walk. If you're going on a hike, say, that you can get from games, just because we can enjoy a struggle of some things isn't the only defining feature of a game. But it is to say that when you have games, this is an aesthetic feature that you can get from them. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
So the next question asks, it says, many people have stories growing up of parents not seeing the value of gaming. And so the question asker asks, should parents stop telling their kids that playing games is a waste of time?
I'm not going to tell parents what to do. This isn't a talk on parenting. Some people will say that kids should not waste their time doodling, doing art, playing music. If Teen Nguyen is right, one of his main points is to show you that playing games not only has an aesthetic value to it, but that it's a unique art form. And if it's a unique art form, then it's going to have a kind of value like drawing, playing music, dancing, any of the arts, right? So it's going to be another art form that has sort of distinctive features. So again, not telling parents what to do, but if a parent wants to tell somebody that they should stop wasting their time by drawing on a pad of paper, I don't think that's right. I think the kid should draw on a pad of paper because I think that drawing has its own artistic value and it's valuable because of that. And so for the same reason, I think games are valuable as well.
Great. Well, thank you. And everyone, welcome to Parenting Hour 101 with Dr. Meg Wallace. Just kidding. Wonderful. Okay. The next question asks, as gamers, should we be actively trying to find the value in the journey throughout a game? Or does this happen whether we realize it or not?
That's a great question. I think having this analogy between appreciating art is helpful here. So you may ask, okay, look, do I need to take art class and art appreciation in order to get the aesthetic values that I can out of looking at a painting or painting myself or looking at a dance or dancing myself or listening to music or playing music myself? Certainly art education can help deepen people's understanding of the art form. And if that's the case, then it seems like knowing that there is aesthetic value and kind of appreciating it at the meta level, as we're doing right now, can be helpful. But do you have to? Absolutely not, because you don't have to take art to appreciate the beauty of a painting either. You don't have to recognize it, but it may help, and it may also allow us to have various different degrees to which we can appreciate this art form.
Great. So we have one more question for you. And that is about the value of unwinnable games. So when it comes to games that are designed not to be winnable, whether that's something like the snake game on Nokia phones where the game just ends whenever you lose, or like you were talking about juggling, which always ends in failing or dropping the ball literally. Do we still, how does the unwinnableness of a game affect the aesthetic value one gets from it? Does it detract at all from that value?
Nice. Well, it might. It kind of depends, right? This is when we do this, it's the voluntary taking up of these ends. And so to the extent that you want to do it, right, you buy into these games. It may be that, you may hate Monopoly. And if you hate Monopoly, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, you will get some value out of Monopoly playing. No, it just may be that you don't want to choose to pick up that game. It may depend on the player. So there may be some players who are really excited about taking up the end of a game that is literally unwinnable. And it may be that that's just the kind of challenge they're looking for. When it comes to taking up unnecessary ends, according to Teen Nguyen, you take these up temporarily. So it's not, you don't really care about them. You're going to take them up and pursue them as if you do care about them, or you are going to care about them as if they aren't temporary. And kind of, for a moment, you're going to strive after them. And it may be that in this temporary taking up of these ends you don't really care about, you also can kind of take up things that are impossible. You can convince yourself that you're going to go after them anyway, and the sort of impossibility of it, you just forget. You just kind of, as you're buying into this temporary end as something you're going to go after, but you know that backed away from this context, you don't really care about it. Maybe also you forget that it's impossible. And so you strive for it anyway, just with maybe the buying in or immersing yourself in this thought that it is attainable and you care about it. And those are both temporary things that you buy into. I'm not exactly sure. It's a great question, but I think something like that may be going on.
Wow, great. Thank you. It's a really inspiring response, actually. I like it. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. So thank you again so much, Meg, for the fascinating and intriguing talk on the value of playing games. This has been the Esports Speaker Series presented by the University of Kentucky Federal Credit Union, which brings you industry professionals, academics, and researchers from esports and gaming on the first Thursday of each month. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See ya.